Hello and welcome to Talking China, the show where we talk to people with unique perspectives and in-depth knowledge about the matters that are important to China today. At the two sessions, the economy has been center stage, from GDP targets and employment to the way that AI can boost the economy in the years to come. Today we're going to be talking to Professor Wang Wen from the Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies and Professor Li Cheng, the founding director of the Contemporary China and the World Center at Hong Kong University, and CGTN's very own Li Jingjing, reporter and social media star who's been at the two sessions this week. Well, let's move on to topic one in our debate with the two professors. Topic one is, are China's growth targets realistic? So the government work report left no doubt that China is determined to maintain strong growth over the coming year with a GDP target of around 5%, a 2% inflation target, aiming to create 12 million new urban jobs. However, there have been questions from outside China about China's capacity to continue growing its economy at such a strong rate. For example, The Economist, China meets its official growth target, but not everyone is convinced. That's reflecting on last year's economic growth. How ambitious are China's growth targets for 2025?
Yeah, absolutely. First, let's look at the last year. The growth rate actually is higher than other top economies, namely United States, Japan, and Germany. China's 5% was very impressive. But more importantly, if we look at the past a couple of decades or even longer, I think the experts, domestic and foreign, usually tend to underestimate rather than overestimate China's annual growth rate. Now, this is also related to the recent move. Sometimes that the Chinese government it's their interest or China's interest to have very high growth rate. That period is over because of the structure change, but also it's intentional because the Chinese government is more interested in sustainable growth and the balance act between economic growth and the environmental protection or green development. I compare with the last year with this year. I think the two sessions, China is in much better shape. It's in very good mood compared with last year, because last year there's some Western narrative talking about China past the peak, it's already the Chinese economic problem and all these negative things. But some scholars still maintain, this small number, maintain confidence about China. So now they are right. Their prediction is more on the right side rather than the other way. So I think that also more importantly, some of the basic things in China to emphasize economy, new energy, and soft infrastructure, meaning social welfare and retirement and this kind of investment, and also innovation. It's extremely important. Just give you one example. There's so many cities. Since I moved to Hong Kong from the US a couple of years ago, I visited a lot of cities like Chengdu, Hefei, and even Guizhou. There's so many cities similar to Silicon Valley, not just Shanghai, Shenzhen, and Beijing. And so that's a very, very important phenomenon. Now, for example, that my glass, the way I just got it from Zhuhai, it's a 3D printing. I just went to the store. They said, I will produce you. Then, a couple of hours later, I get that 3D print, just really for me. So that tells you this is widely spread. I recall that when I was in Washington, D.C. or in New York, I never see such kind of store, a store. That tells you the innovation is really widely spread. And the Chinese government emphasis on technology, particularly in the wake of DeepSeek, really changed the public opinion, and the confidence is on the rise.
Well, as we all know, the government work report of the two sessions in 2025 has set China GDP growth target for this year around 5%, which is already the third consecutive year that the GDP growth target has been set at around 5%. It should be said that this goal is quite challenging. This is one of the highest growth targets among major economies worldwide, far higher than the United States, other G7 countries, and the vast majority of emerging economies. And China's proposals of a 5% GDP growth target is a huge contribution to the world. Over the past decades, we all know China's contribution to global economic growth has consistently remained at around 30%. If China's GDP can still grow by about 5% this year, it will mean that China's contribution to the world economic growth will exceed 35% or even higher, 40%. To achieve this goal, China certainly facing a lot of pressure, but these pressures can be, I think, overcome because the intensity of China economic stimulus policies this year is also unprecedented. Because China has raised, as we all know, this is very important data. China has raised its fiscal deficit ratio to 4% for the first time, instead of previous 3%. At the same time, China has also adopted many pragmatic policies to stimulate consumption. So that means, on the one hand, fiscal investment create more supply, and on the other hand, stimulating consumption increase demand. So both ends of the economic growth are working together. And so that's why I believe that China economic growth target of around 5% can be achieved by 2025. It must be said that the current pressure on China's economic growth mainly comes from external factors. Maybe Professor Lee will mention, because the United States launching a trade war and technology war against China will definitely create pressure. But China, I think, China has confidence and experience to resolve these pressure. Yeah, that's my opinion.
Thank you. Professor Wang, could I just ask you one quick question? You mentioned external forces. A lot of China's economic growth last year was boosted by strong levels of exports. Are those external forces going to affect that in the year ahead?
Because we all know that in the past 1 month, President Trump launched a trade war again and add the tariff rate 10% twice. So I think it's give a huge pressure to China foreign trade. But even that, as Professor Lee Cheng right now mentioned, that now domestically, China's innovation development very quickly, and domestic consumption can create more and more demand and support the sustainable economic growth. And I think it also reflect the recovering confidence, social confidence.
I think we can move on to our second topic now, which is something you both have mentioned in passing, the consumption in China. So the second topic is China experiencing a consumption downgrade? Consumption has been a hot topic for quite a long time in China. There have been suggestions from outside that consumption levels are weak, particularly in relation to developed nations. It's a percentage of GDP. We've got some examples here, one from Nikkei Asia. Most Chinese feel an uneasy consumption downgrade, and another from the South China Morning Post. China's middle class feels the squeeze as property slump hits pocketbooks. So boosting domestic demand was highlighted in the Central Economic Work Conference last year, and also in the government work report just last Wednesday. And there are plans and targets to rise disposable income as well. So Professor Lee, can you tell us how big an issue consumption levels are in China? Is it really important? And if so, what measures are being taken to try and improve levels?
Of course, the stimulus of Chinese consumption is always an important subject, but I have a problem with the term consumption downgrade. I think that is a very, very highly problematic. It seems to suggest that like a tourism, like a more affordable or rational consumption nowadays is a downgrade compared with the previous consumption, which heavily emphasizes the real estate fever. So we may ask ourselves, is that realistic, or is that feasible and desirable? The only just like each family to buy numerous, housing units. I think this is itself is crazy or dangerous. So I would say the so-called consumption degrade should be changed to consumption adjustment or consumption normalcy, return to consumption normalcy. Now, one thing is about tourism. People travel around the country. Wang Wen just mentioned that. It's really fascinating. Last spring festival, this spring festival, the domestic traveling, the total number is almost 500 million. This is more than 1.5 US population. Just within 1 week or a couple of weeks, move around. That's very, very dynamic. So if this dynamic continue, China's consumption, even more serious way, will bounce back. And also that the consumption become more diversified. And on one part, reduce the previous dangerous pattern for put money, 80%, 70% to the property. This is extremely dangerous, need to be fixed. So now people invest in different things. I think the more important is to find the different ways and for other development take priority. So I think it's a welcome development to see Chinese urban dwellers or even rural dwellers have the different ways of consume. Now, of course, we hope that the consumption rate will continue to increase. Chinese saving rate will not maintain that high, but the confidence or development should look at it should be avoiding the put all the money in the real estate. So this is happening. I think that's a healthy development.
Professor Li says there's a readjustment and a positive one in terms of trends of consumption, Professor Wang. Do you think that that's the case? And can you see any other areas where consumption can be more of a challenge? Because it has been stuck at a 40%, 45% of GDP ratio for a little bit, which, as I mentioned earlier, is much less in developed countries. Can you say why that might be and how that might change over time?
I agree that the so-called consumption downgrade is a very ideological terms in economics. For example, I tell you a story. In the past, I used to love driving and thought that a private car was a symbol of identity and standards, even if it was congested every day. But I have to drive and maintain my car and pay a lot of money. But now, to be honestly, I don't like driving because the public transportation system is constantly improving. And taking a car from Didi is also very convenient. So choosing to travel by subway or bus is both environmentally friendly and economical. So I pay less. So is it so-called consumption downgrade? No, I don't think so. It's not called consumption downgrade, but rather rational consumption or consumption rationality. Right now, Professor Li Cheng is talking about the consumption normalization. I think this is also my lifestyle become normal, much normal than before. And tell your database you mentioned, in 2024, China total consumption is 48 trillion yuan, and an increase of 3.5% over the previous year. And some consumption grows very fast, much faster than the other dimensions. For example, right now, Professor Li mentioned, and also I mentioned many times, tourism consumption increased by 70%. This shows that Chinese people begin to enjoy life. And also, of course, we know that China real estate consumption is indeed relatively low, but the proportion of Chinese owned houses or apartment is highest in the world. You cannot always buy a house or buy a car. However, on the other hand, the automotive market is still growing with green consumption, technology consumption, and cultural tourism consumption I just mentioned, all on the rise. So I agree with Professor Cheng right now said, I think instead of saying that China is downgrading consumption, it is more accurate that to say that China is transforming consumption or consumption transformation. So these are my point.
We're now going to turn our attention to the role of foreign investment in China. First of all, we're going to talk to Chongyang, because setting up a business for a foreign person or a foreign company in China can be a little bit daunting. Can you tell us what the Ask China community has said about setting up shop in China?
Yeah, you know what? I think last year we saw a lot of international tourists from around the world traveling to China. You can also see that not just by numbers. You can see all the content creators, travel vloggers. They are making contents traveling in different cities in China: Harbin, Chongqing, Chengdu, Shanghai, Shenzhen. So coming to China become a buzzword. And also in the past few years, I met so many students from all around the world come to study at top Chinese universities. So come to China, live and study in China becomes a trendy thing, and now people want to work in China. So in the community, we got several questions relating to, well, okay, about how to find a good job or how to start their own business in China. For example, someone asked, if some foreigners want to start a small business in China, what kind of support can they get from the government? And are there any financial aids or preferential policies? Another person also asked, for those interested in starting tech startup in China, what are the current trends and the market gaps? So people are interested in starting their own business in China now. I'm not sure whether our guests can answer those questions too, but if any of you know the questions who already working in China, starting your own business in China, you're also welcome to go to our CGTN Global community to answer those questions.
Thank you, Chongyang. And so now we're going to invite our professors back to take a slightly closer look at foreign investment and the role of it in China at the moment and the trends. So topic 3 is foreign capital massively withdrawing from China? So China clearly remains committed to opening up further and to drawing in more foreign capital and foreign businesses. And then the government work report, there was a series of measures set out which showed exactly that, several trials in the medical and education sectors particularly. However, some reports have cast doubt on the momentum of foreign investment in China over the past year or so. One from Reuters, foreign direct investment into China came in at 97.6 billion yuan in January, but that was down 13.4% from the previous year. So, Professor Wang, if we could start with you, is China still an attractive destination for foreign businesses?
Well, as you mentioned, in 2024, China absorbed the foreign investment of around 800 billion yuan, is equal about 120 billion US dollars, a year-on-year decrease of 27%. I think, it's really a very sad data. Also, it indicates that the international investment competition is extremely fierce. Because due to the factors such as interest rate hikes and capital market growth, the United States remains the most attractive country for foreign investment. But even that, China is not bad either, because China attraction of foreign investment, although China attraction of foreign investment has decreased, it is still one of the 3 countries in the world that attracts the more foreign investment. More importantly, in 2024, China established 59,000 foreign investment enterprises, a year-on-year increase of 9.9%. And moreover, the actual use of foreign investment in medical equipment, professional technology service, and computer manufacturing increased by 98%, 40%, and 21% respectively. This indicates that China's attraction of foreign investment has become a more higher quality. And another very interesting data I want to share with you is that in 2024, China outward direct investment reached over 140 billion US dollars, making it the world's most important outward investor. So from this data, I do not agree with so-called foreign capital withdrawing China and other negative opinions about China. To be precise, China remains one of the most worthwhile countries for investment in the world. And at the same time, China is becoming the world's most important investor. So this is my observation.
Professor Wang indicated that the type of investment coming into China has changed. It's a higher quality type of investment. So it's kind of a structural change rather than just a simple decrease. Could you tell us why you think that might be happening, if you agree with his sentiment?
Well, yes, I agree. And first of all, I also want to echo what Professor Wang Wen said. The whole things about the foreign companies withdrawing from China is factually wrong. And because, yes, there's some concern in foreign companies, particularly US companies, but not less to do with China, but to do with the US government, whether Biden's decoupling and the de-risking or Trump's threat, including just a few weeks ago, the investment kind of memo the White House released. This is really want to ban any kind of trade, investment with China. Now, Wang Wen was right that the U.S. did well in the past few years in terms of attracting foreign investment, but now people worry about under the Trump administration, the trade war against every country, including American airlines, will change that, and also that the American domestic instability or this the current tensions with the racial, culture, or you name it, the economic disparity, all this raise a concern about the U.S. Market and etc. This could unfold in China's favor. Now, the question is that, of course, that China's economic challenges partially related with China's own economic structure change from previous export-led development with a huge emphasis on property development. That development strategy is already over. So therefore, that will relate to some of the economic slowdown. But on the other hand, I think that it's a global economic slowdown or structure change, and especially U.S.-led containment against China, as I discussed earlier on. So here is the real issue that we should look at whether China's basic in its economic prospects is good or bad. I think it's very good because China has the world-class infrastructure. China's manufacturing sector, occupied the 30% of the world, just like the US and EU combined. This tells you how powerful the engineering force, China's human resources in terms of engineers, and China's recent IT, AI, and the DeepSeek, etc. And the Chinese government rightly emphasizes new energy, alternative energy, and the digital economy. These are all the things that are right. Now, let me end with one thing. Now, people still may be cynical about China's market, but actually nowadays we talk about protectionism. Usually, we do not talk about China. We talk about the United States. That's a fact. This is also not only just Chinese scholars talk about that. American scholars also emphasize the current situation, especially under Trump administration. That's deeply worry. Now, if China's market is not good, so tell me which market is good? EU, Middle East, Africa, and Central Asia or United States. The problem is that each market has some challenges. Relatively speaking, China's market is still huge. Maybe the only good market is Singapore, but Singapore is so small and too expensive, it cannot compare with China's huge market or US huge market. So let's be realistic. So I think this is not the question I raised. I think the Chinese entrepreneurs and many others and the foreigners will all review that one. I think stability is important. China maintains social political stability. And I think this is very, very important. Maybe, of course, that it's through the Chinese own system and maybe emphasize on security. But on the other hand, which country is not emphasizing security nowadays? So I think that some of the criticism of China is really out of context without comparing with other countries. So my view is really similar to Wang Wen. I think all is, as someone said, the next China is still in China in terms of huge market development.
Dr. Li Cheng right now talking about a very important phenomenon for Chinese market. Let me analyze those opinions. Why those foreign investment talking about withdrawal in China? Because one very important background is that now China domestic market competition are very, very serious. And those domestic entrepreneur, I mean a Chinese domestic entrepreneur, their competition and capacity are very, very strong. And it's not very easy to if international company enter the China market. Now it's not very easy to earn money because the domestic competition of China are very, very serious, and not like the 30 years ago or 40 years ago, 20 years ago. For example, the fast food, McDonald's or KFC, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when they enter China market, they very easy to earn money, right? But now China fast food industry make progress very quickly, and then some voice will happen that foreign investment withdraw China. So I think this is the background of those opinions.
Can I add one thing? Certainly, Wang Wen raised a very important phenomenon: the competitiveness of the Chinese company they face. It's not the state, but the private entrepreneurs, their companies. And but I still wanted to add one thing. I think it's very, very important to provide the good investment environment for foreigners. I think Chinese government emphasis on inclusive growth should be more effectively implemented because when China becomes so competitive, we should also have empathy and also really continue to reduce the negative list, but also provide a good environment. Now, again, Wang Wen and I all agree that some of the issues is not necessarily because of China, but on the other hand, because China is already a very important economic giant, and inclusive growth, whether for global South or for Europe and the United States, is very, very important. Now, this gives tremendous pressure with the EV or many other things for countries like Europe and Germany and also in Asia. I think that it's a challenge for Chinese leadership how to really make the cake bigger and provide domestic investment. I think that it's China's best interest, in everyone's best interest, that the people-to-people exchange, like this kind of economic exchanges, continue to grow, especially in the case of China with global South, with EU, not just one, built road countries and etc.
Cheng, the professor was talking about the strength of the domestic market, and part of that is the renewable energy sector, new energy vehicles, where China is becoming a world leader. Could you tell us a little bit about the balance between economic growth and being environmentally friendly and keeping to China's environmental goals?
Yeah, sure. China's commitment in building harmony between humanity and nature is very, very serious. For example, I'm a journalist. I travel around China, every corner of China. And every village, every city, every province you go, you will see huge signs saying lucid water and large mountains are invaluable assets. That shows how much we are paying attention to building harmony, but that's not empty logo. If you go to some villages in China, you actually see some rivers that were once stinky and very polluted. Now you can swim in. It's very clear waters now. So you can see the results. You can see concrete transformations of the nature. And also I can give you some data. For example, renewable energy now makes up nearly 40% of China's electricity generation. China's forest coverage hit 25% in 2023. absorbing over 1.2 billion tons of carbon dioxide. China also is leading the EV market for a decade, reduced energy intensity by 26% since 2012. And also China have this, some people say, ambitious goal, ambitious commitment, which is to hit peak carbon emission before 2030 and also reach carbon neutrality before 2060. So that's how serious China is in committing, in building the harmony between nature and humanity.
Thank you, Cheng. So that takes us nicely into debate topic 4, which is China sacrificing the environment for economic growth? Cheng has outlined the raw facts between how China hopes to align its economic policies with environmental policies. But there are some headlines from outside China which do suggest there may be a contradiction. One is from the New York Times. China's soaring emissions are upending climate politics. And another from the BBC saying Chinese concrete addiction is a phenomenon which is damaging for the environment. So, Professor Lee, China has a target of reducing the amount of energy it uses to grow the economy by 3% in 2025. How hard is it to reduce carbon emissions while still growing the economy?
I do not see the contradiction of Chinese government policy, but I do see the contradiction with the two foreign media outlook themselves. I think they have poor understanding of the relationship between environment protection and economic growth. I think this is not a contradiction. You do need to do that both. I think in that regard, China and the European countries are very much on the same page. They emphasize, the climate change, the impact to the region. But ironically, that the United States under Donald Trump in the past couple of months, just withdraw from the Paris Agreement and etc. I think that this again, I think to see China and Europe on the right side of history, I really hope that China will do more, make more commitment, because the Chinese leadership realize that environment protection will actually, to a certain extent, stimulate the Chinese economy with new energy development, with EV, with battery, with many other things. Now, of course, China should do more, should make more commitment, and I think, but at the same time, also tell us China's economic growth still has some room if some policy adjustment. So I'm so glad the Chinese government, despite all the challenges or economic slowdown, continue to make a commitment. And so that's my answer to your good question. I hope in this area, United States should correct some of the mistakes, especially the way to withdraw the Paris Agreement and President Donald Trump's view that there's no such thing called climate change. This is extremely dangerous if the U.S. as a major economic power continue to go against the global trend.
Okay, thank you very much. And Professor Wang, could you paint a picture for us? 3% target for a reduction in emissions to grow the economy by the 5% for this year. What does that look like in terms of the structure of the economy? Are there any fundamental changes?
Well, I have to say first that I think it is very unfair to criticize China for being the country with the highest carbon emission. Because you mentioned some Western media, they often mention and criticize China because China now become the highest carbon emissions. And more importantly, carbon emissions are calculated based on the producer principle, not the consumer principle. And China is a factor of the world, producing about 30% of industrial products of the world. These industrial products are not consumed by the Chinese, but the carbon emissions are counted on the Chinese. This is unfair. So when we, you asked how to balance the economic growth and the environmental protection. I think it's for China, it's not very easy, because we all know that nowadays China is currently pursuing the low carbon development. In order to create a better ecology, China's GDP has dropped from 9% 10 years ago to 5% now. Although 5% is also not bad. Chinese city now, as we all know that if you visit China 15 years ago or 10 years ago, a lot of in winter especially, a lot of Chinese city they had the smoke, but now few Chinese city can see the smoke, and right now Jingjing mentioned that you visit a lot of villagers, even very poor, not very developed cities, but you can see a lot of the parks, public parks, urban parks have doubled in the past decades. And also, Jingjing, you mentioned the forest resources, because the country, I mean China, the forest resources doubled, and also the fastest and the largest forest resources growth in the world. And Professor Li Cheng right now mentioned Donald Trump withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement. This is not the first time. So United States always withdraw from the climate agreement. But China has always been an implementer of the agreement. So from this perspective, Western media should stop blaming China for climate change. And also China is truly striving to balance the relationship between economic growth and ecological protections. In this regard, China is still doing better than most countries in the world.
Thank you very much, professors. That's a fascinating discussion. I think that what you spoke about there, Professor, was kind of a theme that ran through our discussion, balance. First of all, you spoke about the GDP targets. Professor Wang, you said they were challenging, but Professor Li, you were a little bit more bullish about them, I think. But then when we moved on to consumption and the foreign capital and then the environment, you both spoke about restructuring. Consumption trends are changing to a slightly higher quality, you said. For the foreign capital, you were saying that there was just a different type of capital that was coming in and they're responding to the demands of the market, and the Chinese market itself was growing stronger, so that was a natural consequence that I think the balances will change. And the environment, of course, then yeah, it's a challenging thing to do to get the economic growth and the environmental targets met, but China is on course to doing it, as you said, and yeah, as you put it, the Western media sometimes is not giving the full picture of a very complex situation. Thank you very much. Two very thought-provoking issues, the role of the middle class in the years to come and common challenges that we need to tackle. So thank you both, Professor Wang, Professor Li, Li Jingjing, of course.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next time on Talking China.